I am not a doctor. I have had zero training in any medical fields. I have zero qualifications. I am by no means an expert in what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm simply a dude who loves to research the absolute balls of subjects that interest him. And having fallen madly in love with training some time ago and the lifestyle and everything that surrounds it, this subject fascinates me. And it's something I've accumulated a wealth of knowledge over. This video is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not to be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a trained health professional before you make any decisions at all on what you put into your body or any changes in anything medical you're going to take on. With that said, guys, let's get into it. Thank you very much for being here. Let's go. Now guys, before we get into the meat, potato and drugs of this video, I've got three things I need to discuss with you really quick. And these three things are super important that you understand before you even think about stepping into this world. These three things are risk, age, and genetics. Now to start off with, I need to talk to you about risk. This is probably the most important thing you need to understand going into this game. So when you're taking steroids, you are gambling with your health. And like gambling as we all know it, in the end, most of the time, the house always wins. It is exactly the same here. Now, how fast the house wins, this is somewhat in your control. Now, if you go into this like a kid in a sweet shop, that time is going to come sooner rather than later. You must understand that this game that we're all playing here, this is a slow march. This is not a sprint. When it comes to these drugs, the truth is, no matter what some people online may tell you, there's no such thing as safe use. There is no such thing as a safe anabolic steroid. There's no such thing as a safe cycle. Only degrees of risk and how well you manage them. Make no mistake, guys, these drugs have filled countless body bags. That said, there are ways that we can approach this kind of lifestyle that will allow us to hopefully stay on the healthier side of the fence. Again, notice how I said healthier, because healthy is not a possibility in this game. But yeah, that is kind of what this short video series is aiming to do, really. I'm wanting to give you guys as much information as I can so that you can make an informed decision about how you want to roll with things yourselves. It's 2025 at the moment, and we are seeing like record numbers of people turning to these drugs. It's no longer the big jack bodybuilder who are using these. It's your average Joe at the gym who's read something about, oh, trend sounds good, let's give that a whirl, without having any idea what they're actually getting into. And that's bad. And the other flip side of this is, guys, like it's kids as well, you know. We're seeing people in like their early fucking teens starting to use anabolic steroids, and it's just absolutely fucking mental. Once you learn about all of the risks and everything you're in for using these drugs at a young age especially is going to have some seriously awful consequences for you at some point. But yeah, now just to list off a few of the things we could possibly be opening ourselves up to if we don't manage our health properly when we use these drugs. Let me list off a few just so you know how real this shit truly is, guys. The one that scares the absolute fucking balls off of me being LVH, that is left ventricular hypertrophy. This is where the heart actually enlarges. And you can't pump blood around your body as efficiently as you once could. This has many downstream effects. But another one, the hardening of the arteries, plaque buildup in your arteries, obviously not a good thing. Once upon a time, your blood could pump through something that wide. Now maybe it's only that wide. I don't really need to tell you what ill health effects that could have. Gynecomastia, male breast development. Imagine you jump straight into a really high test cycle or something like that. You don't understand anything about estrogen management. Next thing you know, you're rocking a cracking pair of double D titties to all of the events you go to from there on out. And a lot of the time, the only way to resolve that is surgery. And gynecomastia is very common among people who use these drugs, you know. But yeah, that's not to mention kidney failure, liver failure, mental episodes, depression, breakdowns. You know, you're really in for a boatload of fun things if you don't track and monitor your health properly when you are taking these drugs. But yes. Anyway, I don't mean to scare you with that. I just need to kind of drill home how real shit gets when you start using these drugs. It's not a game, and it's not cheap to monitor your health properly either. If you're a young kid, just fucking just get the fuck out of here. I've got a bit to say about age after this part anyway. But like, you need to be financially stable most of the time to be able to properly run a lot of these drugs. But yeah, as I say, I just want to kind of drill home some of what you could possibly be opening yourself up to down the line. Anyway, let's move on. Now, in the camp of age, there's a few opinions out in the wild about this, but it is my opinion, unless you are some kind of freak of genetics who is planning to take the Olympia stage by absolute storm at the age of 21, 22. If you're just the average dude who wants to look better than other people, you have no kind of dreams of ever stepping on a bodybuilding stage, wait until you're at least 25 or 26 to start messing around with these drugs, guys. You see, up until that age of 25 and 26, you are still growing. Your brain is still developing. You're still maturing into a fully grown adult. Now, that's not something a lot of people are probably going to want to hear. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who kind of are looking at these drugs at the moment are all kind of in their some early teens, late teens, and guys, that's scary. Let me just tell you this: if you're going through puberty and you introduce these drugs, holy Jesus, you're going to be in for a world of hurt down the line somewhere. There's a lot of evidence out there. Well, it's not even evidence. This is fucking truth. You will stunt your growth. You will you will not develop in the way that you were meant to develop, is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. For example, you could stop the growth of your penis while you're going through puberty by introducing these drugs. That doesn't sound like it's going to be too beneficial too far down the line, you know, when you get to that kind of college, university age and you start, you know, you're getting in there with the women, with the ladies and all of that jazz, or the men. I don't care how you guys swing. And yeah, if you pull out a little half-inch Harry, that's probably not going to do wonders for your self-confidence or anything else, all because you made the foolish decision to take steroids at a very young age. As well as that, there's arguments to be made that this shit can cut off your growth plates. Like, you will literally stop growing taller. Do you want to be a short king with a tiny willy? Probably not. It's not an ideal situation to be in. Guys, wait till you're 25 or 26 to start fucking with these drugs. If you're under that age right now, just focus, get your creatine in, get your protein in. Focus on understanding how to eat properly, how to train properly. If you're still on this path, when you get to the age of 25 and 26, my friends, go for it. You know, you're old enough to make your own decisions at that point. We're all adults here, or, well, that's a problem, I guess. We're not all adults here. Yeah, just fucking wait, guys. It's not worth it. Now, genetics. How are they going to come into what we are doing here? And they come into this in a fairly fucking massive way, let me tell you that. So when you're born, you are given a set of kind of baseline stats. Think of it as like a character creation screen in something like Fallout or Skyrim. you know, when you're like, I'm going to assign 2 points to strength, 4 points to look, 3 points to endurance, that kind of thing. You can think of your genetics as being like that. They're going to control, certainly in the context that we're talking about here, they're going to control things like how much muscle can you grow? How hungry do you feel? At what body fat percentage are you most comfortable? What shape are your muscles when they do grow? What's your bone structure going to look like? How well are you going to actually respond to these drugs? Do drugs give you every side effect in the book, or do you tolerate them genuinely quite well? So with all of that said, it's not surprising that genetics are going to play such a fucking massive role in how we respond to anabolic steroids. So you can think of it from a point of they will enhance your already existing genetics. Let's say you're just kind of jacked from the get-go with minimal training. You have great muscular shape. If you add steroids on top of that kind of already built castle there, you're going to probably get some quite impressive results. And this is where we kind of see the top guys in bodybuilding, you know, before they even touched drugs to get to where they were on the bodybuilding stages, kind of on the Olympia stage and all that jazz. As naturals, they were already freaks. You would probably look at them and say, hey, that person's taking steroids, when they are not. That's just how they looked naturally when they trained. In the world of natty people, there seems to be the belief of, oh, well, if I took steroids, I could look like that too. And guys, that is fucking categorically not true. You will look how your genetics determine you will look. Now, I also want to quickly mention that it isn't a case of you just take steroids, blow up to the size your genetics will allow you, and kind of stay there and live happily ever after until you come off. For your genetics to be the limiting factor in how you look, that is assuming that every other single aspect of your life, from your diet to your training to your sleep to your hydration, that is all dialed in. And when that is dialed in, it is almost more a case of your life is now revolving around this goal of how you want your physique to look. So to the people who are out there who say, oh, I could take steroids and I'd look like them, you are incorrect. The drive these people have to get to that point of their genetics being a limiting factor, that is a personality trait in itself that most people will never possess. That level of drive, that level of determination, that level of discipline, it's just not feasible for most people. For the sake of argument, let's say you do have all of those things dialed in to the point that your genetics are the limiting factor in how you look. You could still look like shit. Why? Because your genetics just don't go past that point. You don't have the bone structure. You don't have that muscle shape. So guys, looking at steroids and genetics from a health perspective, this is really important, and I would absolutely urge you to kind of have a look at what's going on both sides of your family in terms of health and their history of health. Let's say on your mother's side, there's a history of mental illness. You've got some bipolar at the top of the tree there. Your mother has anxiety and depression. You yourself maybe suffer from the occasional depressive episodes, and you are quite an anxious person. And let's flip it again over here on your father's side of the family. What's going on with health for them? Let's say your granddad died from a heart attack at around the age of, 70. Your dad, who's in his 40s, he's already had a heart attack. You're kind of next in line in this genetic pool, you know? So you've got depression, anxiety, mental health issues over here, and you have general cardiovascular issues coming from the other side of the genetic pool. Guys, steroids are going to bring these issues much more to light. It's going to bring them to the surface, it's not worth it. I truly believe that before you decide to take any of these drugs, you want to kind of understand what health issues you may be predisposed to. And then once you know that, you need to make a decision on whether or not you're actually going to follow this path. Just for an example, on the heart side of things, steroids in the cardiovascular system, there's a direct correlation to ill health effects. For example, hypertension, steroids may, or in some cases will, increase your blood pressure. They can also increase the plaque buildup within your arteries. If you're already predisposed to these things, you're just going to speed them up and make them worse. So it's a good idea to understand what you're already in play for naturally before you start throwing drugs into this mix as well. Another thing that's worth seeing as well is, how do you respond to drugs as is? If you were to go in for a course of antibiotics for an infection, do you get every kind of side effect that comes on that list they give you? How do you respond to drugs in general? These are all really important things that's probably worth knowing before you get into this game. Now, what I'm going to do from here on out is I'm going to assume that you guys have no idea about anabolic androgenic steroids. Currently, in my eyes, you guys know nothing. And what are we going to do with this? We're going to start at the very, very basics, and we're going to progressively get more and more in depth with how these things work. So, from the tippy top, let's just start with the name, anabolic androgenic steroid. What does that mean? So when something is classified as being anabolic, what we're basically saying there is that whatever that thing may be that is anabolic, it promotes the building of new tissue. And specifically in this case, that is new muscle tissue. Androgenic, on the other hand, this is referring to the masculinizing side effects of steroids. So this is things like the deepening of the voice, hair growing in places you probably never realized that hair could actually grow from. There's things like anger, aggression, acne, oily skin, guys. Anything that is androgenic is basically promoting male sexual characteristics. In short, if something is androgenic, it is going to promote more male-like features in you. These masculinizing effects that come with anabolic androgenic steroid use, these come because all anabolic steroids, they are all derived from testosterone, and testosterone is the primary male sex hormone. Now, obviously, with that, injecting a hormone that is literally, basically in control of developing young boys into men, you're going to get those masculinizing effects. This is why when women take anabolic steroids, we see like such drastic changes in their appearance. For lack of a better word, over time of use, women will start to look like men. Their voices deepen. The bone structure of the face, it will change, and they will literally have a more manly-like bone structure. Their clitorises will grow sometimes such a length where you could confuse that thing for an actual penis. It's wild. When women take these drugs, don't get me wrong, they get jacked, but they will start to look like men over time. So in summary, anabolic equals gains, androgenic equals side effects, and steroid is the class of family that the drugs belong to. Now, every drug out there that is classified as an anabolic androgenic steroid, it sits somewhere on the anabolic androgenic scale. This means that some drugs are purposely designed with the effect of being as anabolically potent as possible, while trying to really be quite sparing on the androgenic side effects that that compound may give off. When we take anabolic steroids, what happens is they enter the bloodstream and they are then circulated around the body. And our bodies just so happen to be covered in something called androgen receptors. Now, we can think of these androgen receptors almost like tiny locks that we are just absolutely covered in. And anabolic steroids, it just so happens that they fit these locks perfectly. Now, when these keys slot into these locks, they tell the muscles to basically, it basically whispers, hey, it's time to grow bigger. This kicks off a process where your muscle cells, they begin producing more and more proteins quicker than they would naturally. Now, as I hope you know, muscles are made of protein. So, as you would imagine, more protein being created more quickly by your muscle cells, this is going to increase their size. Now, it's important to note that not only does this increase muscle size and the rate of which your muscles will grow, it increases how quickly you can recover. It also prevents your muscles from being able to be broken down by your body as easily as they would be from a point of view if you were natural. Basically, what this means is essentially you can train longer, harder, and more frequently and see results quicker as opposed to if you were natural. Now, guys and girls, unfortunately, it's not all rainbows and unicorn farts and laughing to the sweet shop. Those androgen receptors, those little locks that your body is covered in that we talked about previously, as I said, they are literally all over your body, not just your muscles. They are in your skin, they are in your brain, they are in your heart, they are in other organs and other places you genuinely don't want to be affected by anabolic steroids. But unfortunately, steroids aren't selective in where they bind to. If there's an androgen receptor there, they're going to bind to it. Now, this is partly the reason why we see so many side effects with steroid use. These drugs work, and they work really, really fucking well. In some cases, almost too well. But they come with real risks. And these risks, if you don't understand, they will creep up on you and they will fucking zap your ass out of existence if you don't understand what you're doing here. You need to understand how you can protect yourself against these different side effects that pop up. If you just go into this blindly, you're going to run into problems. If we really want to understand these compounds, we need to go back to the very first anabolic androgenic steroid, testosterone. Testosterone is the primary male sex hormone. Now, that's not to say that it isn't important for women too, because it absolutely is. Both men and women produce testosterone, but men just create it in a much higher abundance. The primary source of testosterone for men is the testes. I'm sure many of us already know that. But the primary source for this in women is in fact the ovaries and the adrenal glands. Now, men also produce testosterone in the adrenal glands too, but our main source is our nuts. Now, the amount of testosterone that we produce also plays a massive factor in things like bone density, how strong we are, how big our muscles are, mood regulation, all the way down to red blood cell production. I guess the key takeaway from this is the testosterone levels, how sensitive you are to testosterone as a compound. It does a lot of stuff, a lot of very important stuff for the human body. Now, there exist conditions out there where people do not make enough testosterone themselves to be able to kind of play into some of these really important foundational things that testosterone assists with. Now, quite some time ago, we found that we could actually measure the levels of testosterone that we could detect in our blood. And through this, we were able to correlate many ill health conditions to low testosterone levels. Now, as a society, as a human race, at that point, we went, it would be pretty cool if we could kind of like pick out that testosterone molecule and make our own synthetic testosterone molecule. That way, we could treat people who have these ill health conditions due to having low amounts of testosterone. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why people may not have sufficient amounts of test. You're probably sat there wondering right now, why the hell is he telling me all of this? I'm just here to learn about steroids, for fuck's sake. But guys, trust me, if you want to know steroids, understand how they work, or have any plans of ever taking them, this is crucial fucking information. You need to understand how this shit works. There are two reasons why men may not produce enough testosterone. Number one, this is primary hypogonadism, and number two is secondary hypogonadism. Now the first one, primary hypogonadism, this is where there is an actual issue with the testicles themselves. The brain is releasing the hormones to tell the testes to release testosterone, but for whatever reason, it just can't. Your testicles just straight up don't work. Think of the testicles as almost like the testosterone factory of the male's body. This is where the large amounts come from. If your testicles don't work at the source, you're a bit buggered and you will have to take testosterone replacement therapy. Now, secondary hypogonadism is very different to primary hypogonadism in the sense that whereas primary is a problem with the testicles themselves, the factory itself does not work. Secondary hypogonadism, you can think of, it's just the message isn't getting to the factory to tell the testicles to produce testosterone. Now, this works via something called the HPG axis. And this is truly some fascinating shit, guys. This stands for the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. And this is the system that is in play in regulating and the creation of testosterone in our bodies. So let's cover how this works. So in your brain, you have hypothalamus and you have a pituitary gland. And obviously, in your ball sack, you have your testicles. Or I hope you have your testicles. If you don't, my condolences. Now, the hypothalamus, this has many reasons for existence, but one of those reasons is to release a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone. What this does is it tells the pituitary gland to release two other types of messaging hormones called LH and FSH. LH stands for luteinizing hormone and FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. Now, these two messenger hormones go all the way down to your ball sack and to your testes, and they say, right guys, or should I say specifically LH says, right guys, we need to make testosterone. That is the role of LH. It tells your ball sack to make testosterone. Whereas FSH, that is very much a big player in the production of sperm. So if either the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland have a problem and either one of them can't release those messaging hormones, it has a downstream effect that stops the production of testosterone and sperm. Now, when you're a perfectly healthy person, this system is called a negative feedback loop. So basically, let's take this from the tippy top. Your hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone. Your pituitary gland picks up that it has received this hormone and it says, okay, damn bro, time to make LH and FSH, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. They travel down to the testicles and tell your testicles to produce both testosterone and sperm. Now, when levels of testosterone get to a certain amount, your hypothalamus and pituitary gland, they pick up on this, and the hypothalamus, it stops releasing gonadotropin releasing hormone. This is a negative feedback loop. So guys, due to these primary and secondary hypogonadism issues, it obviously was very apparent that if we could produce some kind of testosterone, that we absolutely should. And that's exactly what happened in 1935. A German pharmaceutical company by the name of, Schering AG, they produced the first bioidentical synthesis of testosterone, and we were able to administer this to patients to kind of relieve their low testosterone symptoms. Now, as you can probably imagine, given what what testosterone is responsible for in the human body, it didn't take a whole bunch of time for us to understand that we could truly abuse testosterone to get absolutely massive performance enhancing effects. Now, previously, when I was talking about how secondary hypogonadism, the HPTA axis, how we detect the amount of testosterone levels in our blood to then regulate the production in our testicles, that wasn't exactly true from a sense of we aren't detecting the amount of testosterone, we are more so detecting the amount of androgens in our blood. This brings us to the first major side effect of anabolic androgenic steroids, and that is something that is referred to as being shut down. Being shut down, this is where you are basically externally administering androgens into yourself. Pretty much every anabolic steroid that exists is an androgen. So with that, it doesn't really matter what anabolic androgenic steroid you're taking. Let's say you're taking something like Anavar, Primobolan, Masteron, Trembolone, anything like that. It is still going to shut off your natural production of testosterone. And this is a problem, really. Over time, what happens is your testicles, the rumor of people who take steroids have tiny balls, that is not a rumor, that is 100% true, because the testicles, they actually begin to atrophy in the ball sack. So the testicles, it's very much a use it or lose it kind of scenario. And guys, let me tell you, it's not just your atrophied testicles that are a problem. Your hypothalamus and your pituitary glands, two parts of your brain that have been releasing messaging hormones basically for your entire life, they stop doing that. And they're pretty much asleep at the wheel from that point on. They take time to kind of pick up on the fact that, oh shit, I need to start releasing these messaging hormones again. We are essentially self-inducing primary and secondary hypogonadism here at the same time. There's a chance that neither your testicles or your brain recover from what you're doing here. And this means when you eventually stop taking anabolic steroids, you need to recover your own ability to be able to produce your testosterone internally. Now, this process can take months, if not years for some people. And there's some people who really lose this kind of unlucky game here, and they will never recover their natural testosterone production. Ever. They will be shut down for life. They will have to be on testosterone replacement therapy for the rest of their life. Now, depending on your goals, what your kind of time horizon is for this thing, do you want children? Or there's so many compounding factors that you want to take into account when considering this kind of stuff. For some people, the fact that they may never have working testicles ever again, it doesn't matter. Maybe they've had the children and jabbing themselves with a needle a couple times a week truly doesn't bother them. Now, if you're in the camp of taking steroids, that second point probably doesn't bother you a whole bunch. But if you have a vision of having children some point in your life, it's absolutely something that you should take into account. Now, I'm not saying you're going to take steroids and instantly become infertile and your balls will never work again. That's not the case. That is an unlucky scenario if that happens to you. And we often find that it absolutely matters how long you have been exposing yourself to high levels of androgens as to whether or not you can recover, you will recover, how long it's going to take you to recover. So let's say you've been taking steroids for a couple of years. There's a high chance you're going to be fine. But let's say you've been blasting and cruising for 20 years. It's pretty much a given that you're going to be on testosterone replacement therapy for the rest of your life from that point out. Now, before we jump into the next part of this video, there's one final crucial aspect of testosterone that you must understand. And that is, believe it or not, this hormone that we so commonly relate to everything man-like, so bigger, more force-producing muscles, aggression, oily skin, the deeper voice. This hormone is broken down through a process known as aromatization into estrogen, which kind of on paper is somewhat known for the opposite things that testosterone does, you know. Estrogen is the main sex hormone primarily associated with being a woman. You know, it's responsible for those womanly characteristics, you know, breast production, maybe higher voice, wider hips. It's almost poetic when you think about it. So yes, within our adipose tissue more commonly known as fat, we produce an enzyme called aromatase. And this aromatase enzyme will then break down the testosterone molecule into estrogen through that process called aromatization. There is often the belief that men don't need estrogen. Men have, we have testosterone, we get fucking angry and we fucking hit shit and lift heavy weights and stuff. But that is not the fucking case at all. Just like having adequate levels of testosterone equates to many positive health effects, so does having adequate levels of estrogen. If you as a man have low estrogen, you will run into a whole subset of problems. Now, interestingly, if you have too high levels of estrogen as a man, you're also going to run into a subset of problems. Same with women, low estrogen problems, high estrogen problems. You could even say the same about testosterone. Low or high, you're going to have problems. There's a range in which this is considered ideal. Now, for the point we're talking about it, we want that high testosterone and we are okay with the problems or side effects that are going to come from that. But the side effects that are produced from having high or low levels of estrogen are really things that you're going to want to avoid. Now, I do have a whole section later on in this video dedicated to the side effects of steroids and what they do and how we can mitigate them and kind of protect ourselves against them. So I'm not going to go into the problems that high or low estrogen levels kind of create. But one thing to know is that if you are planning to take testosterone for performance enhancing effects, you need to understand that a large amount of the side effects you're going to come up against, chances are that's going to be due to your levels of estrogen in the blood. Now, I'm going to leave you with this before moving on, and that is, if you aren't using testosterone right now, you aren't exogenously administering supraphysiological levels of testosterone into your blood, your body is very much in control of both the amount of test you're producing and downstream from that, the amount of estrogen that is going to be kind of created from those levels of testosterone. And 99.9 times out of 10, that's going to be a happy kind of medium of everything's in range and your body is just ticking along how it needs to. When you make that switch from just your body producing that testosterone to you actually administering, 3, 4, 5 times the amount of test that you produce naturally, guess what else is going to move up with that? The amount of estrogen that is being converted from that testosterone. You're going to end up with much higher levels of estrogen. And guys, this needs to be controlled. There's many different ways we can do this, as I said before, but yeah, just know it's all hunky-dory taking testosterone, but it's not all, unicorn farts and rainbows. There are several other things that need to be considered. For example, as I said, shutting yourself down. Are you happy to do that? Have you considered the risks involved with that and where you want your life to go maybe once you're finished taking these drugs? And number 2, when you are taking these drugs, how much estrogen are you going to produce? Are you going to give yourself literal boobs? You can actually grow boobs as a man due to high levels of estrogen, among a whole boatload of other things. Are you confident enough that you know what you need to do to be able to control those levels. This is all things you need to know about. So we've covered how testosterone is broken down into estrogen via the aromatase enzyme. One thing we also must understand is that testosterone doesn't just break down into estrogen. Some testosterone breaks down into something called DHT, standing for dihydrotestosterone. And it does so via an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. And this DHT molecule that is created through this breakdown process of testosterone, it turns out this is actually 5 times more powerful of an androgen than baseline testosterone is itself. Now, DHT plays a very crucial role in our bodies all the way throughout our lives. So starting with us being in the actual womb, DHT is responsible basically for the development, the creation of your external genitalia as a man. So DHT is going to drive the creation and growth of your penis and the creation of your scrotum when you're actually still in the womb. And then let's move on to later in life, going through puberty. It's going to really drive that facial hair growth. It's going to, unfortunately, bring that acne and oily skin with it along the way. That's why when we're going through puberty, a lot of us will get some quite not great acne. As well as that, it is once again responsible for, let's say, maturing your manhood during puberty. So we can probably all agree that's a very crucial step we want to definitely have carried out there. And going on just through kind of your adulthood life, it's going to be a very big player in the kind of keeping your libido whereabouts we want it. Guys, DHT, when you have a significant amount of this within you, it's going to make you incredibly horny. You're going to be pumping your carrot like 5 times a day, depending on how much of this stuff and how sensitive you are to it. Now, we need to keep in mind that just like estrogen, when you are pinning super physiological levels of testosterone into your body, you are going to end up with elevated levels of DHT. And again, DHT, it's not all fun and games. DHT is the main driver in the factor of hair loss. So if you are prone to male pattern baldness and you end up with really high levels of DHT in your body, it's not even really a question. This is going to absolutely nuke your hairline. It will bring that acne and oily skin back to the scene, just like you're going through puberty all over again. And there's definitely a very large genetic component to this as well. If you are prone, if people in your family are already bald, if male pattern baldness runs in your family, you can bet your ass it's gonna nuke your hairline, 100%, guys. Again, on the acne, oily skin side of things, if you've got quite bad acne going through puberty, you bet that shit will 100% return, and it will probably return with a vengeance as well. Now, interestingly enough, DHT, that molecule that testosterone breaks down into, we actually have a whole subclass of steroids created purely from this dihydrotestosterone molecule. And these are your steroids like Primabol and Masteron, the ones that are known for giving a very dry, aesthetic, kind of peeled look when you take them. Now, the DHTs, they really shine through when you are lean, and they are often brought into cutting cycles, especially Masteron. Masteron is literally known not so much as an anabolic, but almost more for the aesthetic appearance side of things. So with this, if you're already lean, it's only going to make you look that much more dick skin shredded, guys. it's known as like DHTs are very dry, so you don't necessarily get the water weight that comes with non-DHT compounds. Whereas your normal testosterone derivatives, they're going to convert into estrogen down the line. DHT does not convert into estrogen. So you lose all of the kind of water weight that would come with that. And as I said, in return, that gives off a very dry, hard, peeled look. Next up, guys, we're going to go into the differences between injectable and oral steroids. Now, I'm not talking about the compounds themselves, I'm talking purely about the administration method and why we're going to go with one of those methods probably 9 times out of 10. We're also going to discuss something called esters. Now, esters are super duper interesting. So an ester is basically something that is attached to the raw steroid compound, if you will. And what it does is it controls how long that compound will remain active in your bloodstream. It controls how long that steroid will be released into your blood. So to start us off, let's talk about injectable versus oral steroids. So there's some obvious, very big differences between the two. Now, off the bat, let me say that injectable steroids often come with an ester attached to them. We're going to talk about esters in just a second, so don't worry about that. But for the time being, all you need to know is basically that somewhat reduces the amount of time you need to kind of wait between injections. Whereas orals, they don't usually have esters. It's very rare for an oral steroid to come with an ester. So oral steroids, they need to be taken daily most of the time, if not sometimes even twice a day. So let's kick us off and go into injectables. Now, injectable steroids, these can be administered in two ways. Obviously, both ways are injection, but you can do this via a subcutaneous injection, where this is you kind of pinch the fat and put a small needle in, and then you would just, inject yourself into the fat. And that's what we call subcutaneous or sub-Q. Now, there's a few drawbacks I want to talk about for this method. Now, depending on what you are doing, if you are, say, doing like testosterone replacement therapy or taking very low doses of things, and you somewhat don't really like the idea of injecting deep into a muscle, sub-Q might be the way to go for you. Now, if you are injecting more oil, like a high amount of oil, if you have a cycle on your hands kind of thing, I would very much say you're going to want to go for intramuscular for a few reasons. So let's discuss what they are now. So reason number one, if you have to inject quite a lot of oil, it absorbs a lot quicker when it is done into a muscle. Whereas if you're injecting into fat, there's not as many blood vessels in and around like your adipose tissue, so it takes a lot longer for that to absorb. And what we see as a result of that is you can often be left with like a welt or a lump under the skin where that oil is just going to be sat there. And sometimes that can be there for days before that actually absorbs. Now, if you're injecting large amounts of oil, that could maybe be quite painful. I've never done it before, but the idea of having lots of little bumps under my skin where there's just oil sitting there slowly absorbing, that doesn't sound super comfortable to me. So yeah, personally, I would say anything over 0.5 ml of oil, you're gonna want to go for intramuscular. Anything super low dose, you could probably get away with sub-Q. Sub-Q, it definitely works, as I say. Most people who are doing steroids are not taking small doses, they are here for the big bang kind of picture. So yeah, that's something to consider with that. And a kind of benefit to doing sub-Q maybe is like you would use a much smaller needle to do that. So if you're scared of needles, that could be a way to go for you. But again, you've got those drawbacks of welts under the skin, little bumps. And if you're doing a lot of oil, you're going to be fucking covered in them. So yeah, I would recommend you go with intramuscular. Now, intramuscular, let's talk about this. As you can imagine, this is directly into a muscle of your choosing. With intramuscular injections, you can obviously put a lot more oil into one location in one go. So your muscles, they have blood vessels all over them. So basically that oil gets broken down and ingested into those blood and then circulated around the body much quicker as opposed to, you know, the sub-Q injections. So that is certainly a benefit there. I guess a drawback to intramuscular that some people may be somewhat scared of. This, you are going to use a 1-inch needle, and my recommendation would be to basically go with a 25 gauge needle for actually injecting that. Now, let's talk about needle gauges real quick for a second here. So it's kind of backwards in the sense, the smaller the gauge of the needle, say if you had a 19 gauge needle, what this means is that needle is actually much thicker, it's bigger. The hole that, you know, it kind of sucks through and injects out of, that's a lot bigger. So yeah, you're not really going to inject with a lower gauge needle. Some people will use a 19 gauge needle and basically harpoon themselves directly in the arse. Now, those things, they're going to leave a considerably sized hole in wherever you put it. And I can't imagine that is going to be too fun to one, look at, or too fun to two, actually carry out, because that shit's gonna fucking hurt like a motherfucker. So yeah, I would draw your oil into the syringe with a lower gauge needle and inject it with something like a 25 gauge needle or above. When you start getting to kind of that 30 gauge needle and upwards from that, you're gonna have the other problem, you're gonna have the opposite problem of you're going to actually struggle to push the oil through the needle at that point. So again, that is something to consider when choosing what gauge of needle you're going to use. Now, oral steroids, these are a different beast altogether. And the reason for that is anything you ingest, it must pass through your liver. Now, your liver breaks down harmful chemicals into chemicals that your body can manage more easily. Now, to your liver, a steroid is the very definition of a harmful chemical, and it will break that down if we just put that raw powder in there, and you know, it would be somewhat I don't know if it would be fully useless, but you're certainly not going to get you're not going to get the bang for the buck kind of thing. So oral steroids, they go through a process known as 17-alpha alkylation. And what this is, I'm not fully sure of the science behind it, but basically it means that when these oral steroids pass through your liver, it has a go at breaking it down pretty much, but the raw steroid still makes it through. Now, the drawback to this is it is incredibly toxic to your liver when it's trying to break these down. It will raise your liver enzymes and it will cause problems if you do this for long enough. Oral steroid cycles, it's usually only ever recommended that you will do these for 6 to 8 weeks, probably 8 weeks being the absolute max. If you're doing blood tests when you're kind of doing these things, which you absolutely should be, we're going to go into that later, then you will know when you've taken oral steroids, because your liver enzymes will most definitely be elevated, and that's not a good thing if you didn't know. So yeah, oral steroids are extremely toxic, and kind of oral steroids, they're not really mass builders. If you're looking to gain actual muscle, actual contractile tissue that you're somewhat going to keep when you cycle off onto TRT, or cycle off altogether, depending on what your goals are. Injectables are going to be the way to go for that, 100%. Your injectables, your stuff like your Preambol, your Masteron, your testosterone, your nandrolone, injectables are considered safer purely for the reason of they don't pass through your liver. They go straight into the blood once it's absorbed into wherever you kind of injected them. So that's definitely a big point for injectables. Injectable cycles, most guys will run these between 16 to 20 weeks long. So you're getting a lot more exposure to the drug without that kind of liver toxicity. Now, don't get me wrong, some injectable steroids, such as Trenbolone, that's still gonna cause you fucking hella problems. But there's definitely safer options out there. But yes, injectables over orals 99% of the time. Now, that's not to say orals don't have their place. Orals will make you look super jacked really fucking quickly. Like Dianabol. If you take Dianabol, within 2 weeks, people are going to be like, "What you doing, bro? You're looking a bit sus there, my friend. Looking a bit saucy, you know what I mean?" And that's not because you've gained pounds and pounds of muscle in that time. That is because you've basically blown up through just more muscle glycogen and water weight and stuff like that. They do make you look jacked, and it is an addictive look, but they are doing harm. Orals will also make you strong as fuck relatively quickly. Things like halo testing, Superdrol, you're going to lift weights that you have never been able to lift before when you bring these things around to play. But you must understand that the very second you take them out, however you looked or whatever strength that oral gave you, that is gone pretty much with the wind as soon as that oral is removed. Now, as I said previously, oral steroids, they don't have esters attached to them, so they need to be taken daily, and they are sometimes even twice daily. So again, that's adding to the problems that they will cause, because your liver is like breaking down this steroid, as I said, sometimes twice daily, definitely daily if you're running them in a cycle. So yeah, I've got a section coming up next in the next video, basically going over a bunch of very popular steroids, and we're going to discuss their use cases. But yeah, 99% of the time, guys, oral steroids, you don't really need them, probably, unless you're getting ready for like a photo shoot or you're stepping on a bodybuilding stage. If you are just a gym bro who wants to look better than the average Joe, just stay away from orals. They are inherently toxic, and they will damage your health over time. Injectables win 99.9% of the time, guys. Now, esters. What the hell are esters? Now, if you've been doing research into this kind of world for a little bit, or maybe you haven't, often the drug name, or certainly when we're talking about injectables, the name of the drug will be followed by the ester. So if you hear people talking, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I take testosterone enanthate, testosterone cypionate, I use trenbolone acetate." So first there you have the name of the drug, what you're taking is testosterone, and then you have the ester that is kind of attached to that drug, which is the enanthate, the propionate, the acetate. Now, different esters control how quickly or how slowly that drug is released into your bloodstream. Now, longer esters and shorter esters, they both have their advantages and kind of disadvantages. So a couple of the more common shorter esters, they're going to be propionate and acetate. Now, you'll often see these referred to as prop and ace. And your more common longer esters, they're going to be your enanthate and your cypionate, more commonly seen as just abbreviated to an E or a C. So your shorter esters, you're going to hear things like testosterone prop, tren ace, and your common longer esters, you're going to hear things like test E and test C. Now, there's so many esters that actually exist out there in the wild. There's probably even pushing hundreds of them. Now, some of them are way more common than others. And some of them you're probably never even going to see attached to a steroid, so that doesn't particularly matter. Now, as I said, these both have their kind of advantages and disadvantages. For example, a shorter ester, it peaks in the blood much quicker, but it also leaves the blood much quicker, meaning you need to inject that steroid much more often than you would a longer ester. So say you're using acetate, something like that, you're probably going to need to inject that at least once every other day, if not every day. Now, what is the benefit of that? We could say the benefit of that is, let's say you have a drug that you've never used before, but you want to kind of understand what side effects you can somewhat expect from that drug. You could use a much shorter estered version of that drug, so it's going to come into your body quicker and it's going to clear much quicker. You can kind of write down what side effects you have from that, because guys, you're going to have side effects from the vast majority of these drugs. It's our job to, understand what side effects we're happy with dealing with and which ones we just straight up can't deal with. So yeah, in that sense, shorter esters for trying to understand how you're going to react to a certain drug are probably a good idea, rather than whacking a longer ester of something into your system that is then going to hang around for, maybe months, guys. Deca is the longer estered version of a drug called nandrolone, the shorter estered version being called NPP. Now, Deca is somewhat famous for some quite brutal side effects. If you just went into it blindly and just went straight for Deca, the long estered version, and 2 months in, you're realizing that you're really depressed, you're a dickhead to be around, and you're just feeling genuinely emotionally numb, for you to get rid of those side effects, that's going to take a considerably longer amount of time, as opposed to if you went for something like MPP, the shorter version of that nandrolone drug. So yes, shorter esters mean much greater peaks and troughs in blood levels depending on how often you're going to actually administer those injections. Whereas longer esters, you're going to get a much more gradual build up and then a much more gradual drop off, which kind of, all things considered, will lead to more stable blood levels of that drug in your system. And that's something that we should all kind of consider when we're getting into this. You want as stable a blood level as possible. You don't want fluctuating levels of hormones. You don't want those to be going up and down. You're going to be absolutely all over the place, just in terms of kind of like your mood swings, your attention span, your anger, acne breaks out, just general side effects. Big swings in hormone blood levels are going to generally correspond to more side effects. If you've made it through this far of the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope I've given you a lot to think about. I hope I've educated you. I'm hoping I've maybe told you something you didn't already know. Now I'm going to end this video here, guys, because I think it's getting a bit long. I have a literal 50-page script for this stuff. So yeah, we've talked about a few things we want to consider before even thinking about taking steroids. We've talked about what they do. We've spoken about testosterone. We've spoken about the HPTA and all of the stuff that comes along with testosterone. We've covered injectables versus orals. We've briefly talked on esters. Yeah, I think we've lined up well for the next video, which is going to be, we're going to talk about different popular steroids, their use cases, and what you can expect from them. So guys, stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to be doing this. I'll see you in the next one.